Thank you, Mr. Tiku and Mr. Satwinder Singh. In this first technical session, we have two guest speakers, Mr. H.L. Tiku and C.S. Satwinder Singh. Mr. Tiku will talk on art of advocacy and courtcraft, and C.S. Satwinder Singh will talk on transitional provisions under Companies Act 2013 and Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2015. So before they start, I'll give a brief introduction of both the speakers. Mr. H.L. Tiku, born in 1943, graduated in 1964 from University of Jammu and Kashmir, did Bachelor of Law in 1967 from University of Punjab. He enrolled as an advocate in 1968, have mainly been practicing in the Honorable High Court of Delhi and Honorable Supreme Court of India. He appears regularly before other high courts tribunals as well. However, the years represented large industrial houses, nationalized and foreign banks, domestic and international airlines, societies on matter touching upon commercial dispute, constitutional law, company law. He is designated senior advocate from High Court of Delhi. He is also member of Supreme Court Bar Association, including Bar Association of Delhi. He is associated with social organization and rendering free service to them. Our second speaker, Mr. Satwinder Singh, his partner in Vaish Associates, is a council member of ICSI. He heads a firm corporate law practice at New Delhi. He is having 23 years of experience. He has extensive experience in handling mergers, acquisition, corporate restructuring, joint ventures, collaborations, private equity. He also represents his clients before various courts, high courts, company law boards, SEBI and other quasi-judicial authorities. He has advised several multinational Indian companies in various matters involving inter alia strategy, negotiation and implementation of transaction in the area of merger and acquisition. He, along with his team, has authored the book titled Companies Act 2013. He is also co-author of the book of International Business Acquisitions. On behalf of NIRC, I welcome both the speakers. And before the start of technical session, I request Mr. Madan to present green plant to Mr. Tiku. I'll request Mr. Ranjit Pandey to present green plant to Mr. Satwinder Singh. Thank you, Mr. Pandey. Now I'll request Mr. H.L. Tiku to please start his presentation. Please, sir.
I had expected Mr. M.M. Kumar, the President, to be here, but I'm told that he is busy somewhere else. Therefore, missing him. I'm also missing Mr. Chandok, who spoke to you a little while ago, a dear colleague who has always been a smiling face for all of us in the faculty, or whether it was the High Court or the Supreme Court, but wherever it was. My dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, while welcoming the formation of NCLT, it has opened up diverse opportunities for company secretaries who stayed away from erstwhile CLB of the years. Now that the NCLT is constituted, I have found some of the interesting opportunities for the company secretaries to follow. Namely, they are authorized to appear before the tribunal and appellate tribunal, which was not earlier the authority. The National Commission has been empowered to pass on orders on the winding up petitions, as it was earlier by the High Court, and the company secretaries can appear before the tribunal and the appellate tribunal in such cases. They can also advise and assist corporate sector on mergers, amalgamations, demerger, reverse merger, compromise, and other arrangements right from the conceptual to the implementation level. Preparing schemes appearing before the NCLT for approval of schemes and post-merger formalities, making a reference of SIC Industrial Company. Practicing company secretaries have been permitted to act as liquidators in case of winding up by the tribunal. Practicing company secretaries can be appointed as technical members of NCLT, and so on and so forth. So you have a wide opportunity now to be as an advocate, and I would not say that the company secretaries in such a situation will pose any threat to their lawyers, because you are yet in an infancy stage. Company secretaries are in fact in an infancy stage at the moment. That's why I've been asked to speak on the art of advocacy and the court craft. Asked to speak on the art of advocacy and the court craft. In the practice of profession, the lawyer has to deal with a variety of the human relations and have his mettle constantly tried from every point, and it gives him a special opportunity to equip himself with those qualities which count for preeminence in society. The capacity to analyze and sift facts, that's what the lawyer's job is, what he can do. To penetrate in most recesses in human mind, to discover the source of men's actions, to discover and take true motives, and to perceive and present them with discreetness, accuracy, and force, are all qualities which are practiced and the lawyer is demanded from the lawyer itself. The profession of law, being noble one, it is up to the advocates to ensure that people respect and not despise it. Professional ethics is the prime and foremost important aspect. Although this does not deal with the art of the advocacy at the moment, but it certainly gives me an opportunity to tell you that ethics is the far most important for any advocate to hold. Character is vital in all professional and walk of life, and in the legal profession particularly. The maintenance of honesty of a lawyer is a matter of first importance. It is said that character grows from every transaction, little or high. Then we have the other aspects, such like what are the duties of an advocate towards his client? He must give him an impatient hearing. There are many impatient lawyers like me. I had grown as an impatient lawyer, but I have subdued over a period of time. I must tell you that. Must give a patient hearing to the client. Must hear him what he wants to express. Must examine all his papers. After discussing case with the client, advise him correctly what is the case that the way you have understood and according to law must not encourage illegal transaction, foremost avoid the conflict of laws. Now this is very important for a lawyer to follow. The second aspect is duty towards a court. The cardinal principle which determine the privilege and responsibilities of an advocate is that he is an officer of court. We always say a lawyer is an officer of the court, but he is not an agent of the client at the same time, I must say. He is only mouthpiece, a spokesman for his client. Many people have a wrong impression that a lawyer is an agent of a client. It is not so. Nonetheless, a lawyer is an officer of the court. It is to facilitate the administration of justice, because a lawyer is an officer of the court. He only facilitates the administration of justice. Now, any conflict with the judge, you know the consequences can be grave. A judge is also a human being. He carries impressions. Conflict with the judge renders the trial disagreeable to all and is injurious effects on the interest of the client. Imagine a lawyer loses a temper with the judge, does not realize the consequences. What is likely to happen if a judge holds it against him and manipulates or manures, I would not say that he would manipulate, or feels that he does not deserve. That is the cause, because the lawyer has lost their temper. Must not act, a lawyer must not act to corrupt and or divert the stream of justice, must not deceive the court. It's very important for any lawyer to come before the court in truthfulness. Limited to his case, he can choose. He need not to tell lies. He can choose for his client what to speak and how much to speak and what to speak and what not to speak. When we say what not to speak, is not that he is holding it from the client, or in fact he is holding from a client and therefore wants to deceive the court. It's not so. He has a choice. This has been a practice in England, this has been the practice in America and all over. And Indian lawyers are considered to be a mark over all lawyers in the world. I must say that. I'm so satisfied, because I had an occasion to be in Germany, I had an occasion to deal with the English lawyers, the American lawyers and other lawyers too, but I always felt that we Indians were hard-working and we knew what we are doing. We always had We have also a duty towards the opposite counsel. We have a tendency, most of the lawyers, I must say that with certainty, have a habit of browbeating with the other lawyers, the opposite counsel, which is not a correct way, and it's not a disciplined lawyer's job. You have invariably many times seen the lawyer telling the other, "My lord, he does not know his case." This is very insulting. Or he says he is only misleading the court. These are not the practices. This should be disowned by all and every, whether it's an old lawyer, is a new lawyer, or is a fresh lawyer. The purpose is to be respectful to the lawyer, because it is twofold. Firstly, you win a friend. Secondly, you need not to react. Secondly, you leave a mark of impression with the presiding judge as well. So therefore, it is imperative that while doing so, holding yourself or being calm, you are earning two ways: a friend who is your opposite counsel, and you even the good impression to the judge who is there to decide your client's fate. Now, this is also an important aspect. Then you have another topic, It's very important for lawyers, I must say. It's not that you receive a client, you receive the money, you do a job and that's the end of the matter. A constant, progressive working in any brief is a requirement as on today under the law. Mr. Chandok a little while ago said, if you remember, he says we have different courts passing different judgments on the same day. It's true. It is very true. You'll find a judgment on a particular point on which you base your opinion, and then if you do not do a further probing in the matter, you will find there is another court having passed a judgment different. So you are in such a situation where you are not able to make up your mind as to what to speak and what not to speak and how to formalize your action as an advocate. If you don't familiarize yourself and remain updated with the law, you're bound to fail. You're bound to cut a sorry figure, and that reflects on your position as an advocate. You know, I have not in my 50 years of my practice at the bar, I must say, I have rarely seen a lawyer going out and I'm the best lawyer. No lawyer says that. It's your performance. It's your client who does the public relations. I had gone to so-and-so lawyer. He dealt with me excellently in terms of money, in terms of matter, and he won my matter, though I did not expect that to happen to me. But he acted very hard and earned in good order. So therefore, it becomes necessary for a lawyer to remain updated and remain successful throughout in his practice. If you find there are too many plaintiffs, too many defendants, and you are appearing for one, you must know that inter se between the defendants, that means two respondents, or the two petitioners, appellants, or whatever, there could be a conflict of interest. You must know where there is a conflict of interest. Don't accept the brief. Say, sorry, I cannot accept it because there is a conflict of interest vis-a-vis respondent number 1, respondent number 3, and me because I represent you as a respondent number 4. This should be avoided because eventually, ultimately, if you hold on to the brief in a matter where there is a conflict of interest, judge is bound to comment on you. You should, Mr. Tikku, you should not have accepted this brief. You had acted for someone and you are now acting for on the other side. It is not correct. So it reflects on your character itself. Another important aspect that a lawyer must maintain is the confidentiality of his client and his matter. It's very important. You need not go around that I am working for so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. I am working on so-and-so's matter, which is so-and-so, involves so-and-so. This is not done. A lawyer need not to do this. This is breach of confidentiality because once we say a conversation between a client and a lawyer is confidential, this is part of the confidentiality. A man may not like to get exposed. So therefore it's very important. Having dealt with the ethical issues, I feel it's necessary to explain the concept of advocacy as its corollary to the principle of professional ethics, and one cannot be independently executed without the other, as both are essential facets for the advocate's success. There's an old saying, live like a hermit. This is Lord Atkin said that. This quote to me is an essence of advocacy, and without which no man can achieve success. Sine qua non is what is important aspect for any lawyer to achieve success in this professional career is hard work. You will find, so Lord Denning has said in one of his judgments, don't look to the money of the client. Look to his brief, understand what his brief is, then you are entitled to money. I would not say we do it first hand or we do it later, but the practice is bad. We must first understand what the matter is completely. Capacity to hard work depends on each individual. How much do you want to work? How much do you can? But surely, working for half an hour throughout the day, and next day you miss out a day, the third day you sit for 5 hours, is not hard working, according to me. You must remember, you must build up consistently the style of working. You will be surprised, I must tell you, which I have noticed, in Punjab and Haryana, the lawyers were brilliant lawyers, original side lawyers. They get up at 4 o'clock. Stenographer comes at 4 o'clock. They dictate by 8 o'clock, the work is over, and the petition gets ready by 10:30, they file the petition. Does it happen? Ask yourselves. It doesn't happen with all the, but they are the traditional lawyers, even the young lawyers. 4 o'clock in the morning, the stenographer comes. It's because they have dedication, they have put fetters on themselves. A man getting up at 4 o'clock, whether he is sick or he is not sick or he is unwell, he still has to get up because he has called stenographer at 4 o'clock to dictate, and he will get up. This is how they have created barriers for themselves to work hard, and that's how they work hard. Therefore, that is one of the most important aspects as you should follow. Everybody knows what is important in a particular matter, but there are 7 facets which a lawyer must mug up and understand, that these are the material facts which he must follow as he would follow going to a temple as respectfully, or to a gurdwara, or to a mosque, or to a church. These are very important. Honesty. Must follow honesty. No matter you receive less money or you receive the big money. Money is not the criteria. Honesty brings you at a level amongst the lawyers who have attained a position of command as a lawyer in the society. They have followed the pursuit of honesty. Not quoting me anywhere, I have over these years known Mr. Nariman, Falli Nariman, who is one of the brilliant lawyers, constitutional lawyer, practiced in Supreme Court. In his lifetime, this I can say with surety, he has never received a cash component. He doesn't receive money in cash. There is no question. He has elevated himself to a position that even a man at 80 serves him. This is because of his honesty. And he reads this brief, he does his brief. 99.99% is his rate of success. One can say that safely. This is because of the honesty. Then the other aspect is courage. Courage, advocacy is a form of combat where courage in danger is half the battle. If you have the courage, you have won half of the battle. You need not to do much. Therefore, there are many lawyers you will find, no, I'll deal with the subject. He has gained that courage by virtue of his hard work. He knows his facts, he has mastered his facts, he has seen which are the subjects which are involved in the particular matter. He has grasped the law and he is up to date. Therefore, he gathers the courage to say, I know this matter, I can do it myself. What is the point? Mr. Chandok referred to Justice H.L. Anand, a judge of the Delhi High Court. I had the privilege to be his junior way back in 1967. Until he became the High Court judge, Delhi, and I would say in Asia, could not produce a lawyer of his caliber. We had so many lawyers, but there was something special about him. And what he said is correct. He was always a teacher. Even when you would go to his chamber, he would tell you, Mr. Tikku, please take this file and go to the library, look up law on mortgages, and look up the chapter number so-and-so, so-and-so, you're page 213. It used to be exactly page 213. He taught lawyers. His lawyer, he was a lawyer, his chamber had more than 80 lawyers. Because I have worked for that institution for almost about 2.5 years. What he practiced was something amazing. You could never carry a dirty file cover or file to him which has a dirty file cover. He would just say, don't spread epidemic in the office. Change the cover and come back. No matter who was sitting around there. That was his ethics. He would see your shirt is dirty. He says, you can't afford a shirt. Go to the accountant and take some money and get some shirt stitched for yourself. That was his caliber. You can't send your black coat for dry cleaning, take some money from the accountant and go and get your suit dry cleaned. Be neat and clean. These were there very few. Nonetheless, then wit is another important factor which you must have. Every lawyer has an anxiety that he must win the matter. He knows what is his client's fate. He knows how good and bad his matter is. Yet he is always anxious. And judge is also anxious to know the more of the truth in the matter so as to do the justice. When two things, friction, the anxiety and the judges, worry to render the justice, get together, it causes a friction. Friction. And then to ease that situation, you must cut a joke in the court, which makes judge laugh, which makes the other colleagues laugh, and you are equally benefited because you get away from that anxious moments. It's very important. Rather than to generate heat at that moment and cause a prejudice to your client, judge to take an impression about you, because judges once form an opinion about a lawyer, it's opinion for all times. I must tell you, lawyer, too, you are going to be from tomorrow the lawyers. It's very important. I have seen in my career of 50 years that certain lawyers were being briefed only to take adjournments. There were many, not now, many, and they were only known as the German masters. Oh, so-and-so, I'll not name, so-and-so has come over, he wants. Judges used to be difficult, but he used to plead A, B, C, D, E, F, somehow get away and take an adjournment. But this, why I had to say this, because judges carry an impression. If you have smartly done your matter, no matter you have not won the matter or the decision is against you, it should not depress you at all. Your conscience should be clear that you have worked hard in a matter, you have achieved self-satisfaction in a matter, and if you have lost the matter, that's the client's luck. We always say client must also have a luck. My hard work does not always matter much. He should also have a luck. Anyway, that's the wit part of it. Then we have another aspect, eloquence. You know, I must tell you from my experience, my Hindi language is pitiable. I can speak English and Hindi and English and all kinds of things, but it's not palatable. Many years ago, I had earned an order from Supreme Court. This was to be implemented in Patna in a rent matter. And the lady judge was a district judge. I'm giving you an example what can happen to a man who is not aware of a language. So I started off in my language. So she said, संक्षेप रूप में बोलिए, संक्षेप रूप में. So I looked at the So he came close to me. I said, what is the sankshet? What is the sankshet? He says, sankshet means briefly. So how a lawyer feels small. That is a smaller court. But if you now, I find in Uttarakhand, in all the high courts, in Himachal, in Punjab, in Bihar, in Patna, Hindi. It's so difficult. It's so difficult. I was in Patna only 3 weeks ago. He says, "आपको ये करने का था, करने का था क्या means? What does he mean?" You see, I looked at my left and right. Who's he telling? He says, "Mr. Counsel, I'm telling you." I said, "I mentioned the matter in the morning." नहीं आपको बोलने का था, but was he insisting बोलने का था, बोलने का था? What am I supposed to do? I mentioned the morning, he listed it. At 12:30 I came and I'm arguing with my decisions. करना था, करने का था. You know what I mean to say, the language is very important aspect of your professional career. Fluency, force and style of using the language is very important. That is your holding AK-47 for yourself, but not to shoot someone. It's only in harmony with you to remain equipped and mix. Then, strong vocabulary along. You must read constantly. Nothing stops you from reading. If you have chosen to be a lawyer, if you have chosen to be before a tribunal or come to the tribunal, practice. You have to go before the mirror and practice. Build up your style. Build up your language eloquence. Use dictionary, this, that and the other. Make your language a perfect language. Command that everybody would say yes. There are so many occasions which I have witnessed, a lawyer arguing a matter, then he goes away, some of the clients running out, "Sir, what is your address? Give me your telephone number, give me your..." He says, no, I don't have time, this, that, and this mainly happens in Bombay. The lawyers, because clients get impressed. They don't understand what a lawyer is talking. But the language impresses them, strong wording impresses them, and he looks forward to a lawyer and goes to him for help. You'll be Supreme Court in one of its judgments way back in 1993, I believe so, 1993. They say advocacy is not a craft. This is, I'm reading from the judgment itself. But a calling, a profession wherein devotion to duty constitutes the hallmark, sincerity of performance, and the earnestness of endeavor are the two wings that will bear aloft the advocate to the tower of success. Given these virtues, other qualifications will follow of their own account. This is the reason why the legal profession is regarded as a noble one. This is the expression used by Supreme Court regarding advocates. Of course, this is 1993 Supreme Court, but subsequently they have said something else also which I am not interested. I need not to depress you from that. Then a lawyer must know that the advocate's profession is a service being provided to the society. If you don't bear that in mind, then you should take it from me, you are not going to excel in the profession because your limited scope and your relationship would be you as a lawyer, client, money, judgment or no judgment. If you believe that you are also service-oriented, your profession, then you have to excel. You have no other choice but to excel. In my young days, I must give you an example. In my young days, that reminds me of an incident. A sitting judge of the Delhi High Court tells me, there is something under your sleeve. I couldn't take this expression. That means he did not trust me. I was arguing for half an hour before him. And he says, there is something up your sleeves. I said, I have not. I closed my file, told the judge, there is nothing in my pockets, there is nothing in under my sleeves. I have only one thing, that is the truth which I have spoken for half an hour, which you have not appreciated. Sitting judge with another judge. I said, if you don't have, my arguments are not palatable or they are not acceptable, you pass on judgment, that is all. Condemn me as a lawyer. But you can't use these expressions. This is not the court language. I'm sorry. If you want me to address you in Hindi, I'll address you in Hindi. Of course, my Hindi was pretty bad. I would have messed up myself. But nonetheless, I told him. But I must tell you this fact. I even today regret having fought with the Chief Justice. I must tell you, after 30 years, this incident is as old as 30 years. I fought with the judges. But I have always regretted it now when I have grown up in the profession. I think this doesn't do any good to you. They hold it against the lawyers. You see, a lawyer is a lawyer from the day he joins the bar till he becomes a senior. Seniorship comes to a lawyer by virtue of his acknowledgement by the judges that he is knowledgeable, his behavior is excellent, and he is good, and he deserves to be designated. Now, all these incidents impair that position which you want to attain at the age of 30s or 40s, but the judges, you have fought for the judges, they don't give you. So you lose. There are the judges, yes, come in, please, Mr. Tikku, please come in. Tell me which matter. Everybody gets surprised. That is what has to be earned. So these are some of the most important aspects which I have practically followed, which I would convey to you as a lawyer friend, and I see you every day wherever you are now practicing in CLB. I'm also sometimes there. And therefore, they must be part of your system. With these few words, I wish one and all of you nothing but all the best in the professional pursuit. Thank you so much. जी बैठना
Thank you, Mr. Tikku. Now, in this technical session, I invite Mr. Satwinder Singh to please start his presentation.
साइड पे नहीं लगा सकते यहाँ पे, इसको साइड पे लगा सकते क्या चीज़ ये इसको, हाँ नीचे नहीं यहीं पे यहीं पे यहीं पे, हाँ छोड़ दे छोड़। Friends, a very good afternoon to all of you. I said very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you. At the outset, let me thank NIRC for giving me this opportunity to be before you, to speak today in the seminar, which probably was one of my topic, NCLT, Changing Contours of Corporate Litigation, when I was giving my topic in Lucknow. Somehow NPS had said, no, this is a tagline, we would like to take it. I said, that's fine. But after listening to Mr. Chandiok, Mr. Tikku, who I always, you see, feel envy about them. Why? Because as and when I am in the court and they are appearing before the bench, I always take the opportunity to stay back, listen to them, and then ask to myself, कि सतविंदर तू कभी ऐसा हो सकता है कि हो सकता ही नहीं है. I think thank you sir, you being our inspiration and will continue to strive the kind of excellence you have attained. This is, personally I am looking at it is that how best we can achieve it. And when I say that, somehow I always feel that, okay, there is always an opportunity in adversities. And Nisar Bhai's family and we had gone to vacation this time. So we were, I think in Moscow, when the message came from NPS, sir, aapka topic humne rakh diya, you have to come back and prepare on the transitional provisions and insolvency and bankruptcy code, which has made effective. I said, NPS, yaar, maine to abhi padha bhi nahi hai. No, sir, you have 3-4 days. You come back, prepare it. And thank you so much. Personally, I would feel that maybe whether I'll be able to do justice or not. But personally, it gives me opportunity to read almost most of the code which is relating to the NCLT and the other things. And looking at it is, wow, what an opportunity for us as a company secretary, as a professional. That's another opportunity how best we can excel it. Time is a constraint. If I start talking about the transitional provisions, then it will take about 15-20 minutes. So NPS directed me, sir, please wrap up the transitional provisions within 5-7 minutes. Concentrate more on the insolvency and bankruptcy code. So I'll skip some of the slides, which I'll make it that what was the situation which was in the Companies Act 1956, you all are knowing. So I'll not elaborate much on this. When the jurisdictional provisions are with the High Court, Company Law Board, BFR, and then we had Section 622, 623 of the Companies Act 1956, which gives power to the presidency magistrate or a magistrate of a first class to take up the offences under the Companies Act, which you see, we used to go to 30,000, where the ROC has issued the notice. So all that has gone to the jurisdiction under the Companies Act 2013. When we talk about, on the one side is the NCLT, then it is going to NCLAT as Appellate Tribunal, and the appeal from the NCLAT order will go to the Supreme Court. And on the other side, when you have to be tried for the offences you have committed under the Companies Act, you have to go to the special courts, which has been set up under the Companies Act, and then to the High Courts, and then from the High Court it will go to the Supreme Court. So this is just a brief about how the spectrum of the jurisdiction which has been enshrined in the Companies Act 2013 that has been taken it up. Now, NCLT is already in place, and as NPS mentioned the other day, we were in the NCLT, we saw that even the Appellate Tribunal Court has also been in operational, and they have taken one matter. So all the matters that has been notified, where all the matters which were pertaining to CLB, that has gone and stand transferred to NCLT pursuant to the provisions of section 434 subsection 1. And the draft rules related to NCLT under Rule 102, it provides for all cases reserved for order prior to the effective date to be reopened and rehearsed by NCLT. That's again the issue. And then all proceedings under the Companies Act 1956 before the District Court or High Court shall stand transferred to NCLT. And NCLT may proceed with such proceedings from the stage before the transfer that has not yet been notified, and maybe that new cases can start coming in NCLT. But when I was reading, why I've highlighted in the red part is that when I was reading this code, they have amended 434 through the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, where they have added one more proviso that provided that only such proceedings relating to winding up of companies shall be transferred to NCLT that are a stage as may be prescribed by the central government, and that has been further 434 has been modified. And then comes to the most important, which is, I am linking it with the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, is when we have to talk about, so I'll just skip for this thing because all the proceedings which are under SICA, that will stand abated because the concept is changed. The contours of the litigation is changed. We have a BFR. We were talking about that if the company's net worth has been eroded, and we had the concept that, okay, it is a potentially sick company and then it is going to be a sick company if the entire net worth is eroded. And the entire net worth is eroded is that if the accumulated losses are more than the net worth, then your company become a sick company. It is no more a potentially sick company, and the reference go to the SICA. And if you look at it, the Companies Act 2013, which was there, probably the entire section which I am coming to this, the entire chapter 19 has been omitted through the banking, this code, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Entire chapter has been deleted. There are many amendments which I'll just brought it to you for this. The thinking was changed. They brought the concept, no, we don't want that, okay, the net worth erosion should be the criteria for sick company. They brought the liquidity criteria. What was the liquidity criteria in the Companies Act 2013? the liquidity criteria was that if you have not been able to pay on demand more than 50% of the debt due to the secured creditors, then it is not an automatic SIC company, then the secured creditors reserve the right, and there was no provision as regard the unsecured creditors were concerned, that they can have a recourse to go for a revival and rehabilitation. And they brought the net on criteria to the liquidity criteria, and the right was only to the secured creditors. And they can put it to the NCLT. NCLT will then determine whether you are a SIC company or you are not a SIC company. And then you will take it further to that part, that on that determination whether what would be the rehabilitation process, that has to be taken it up. And if it is not taken up, then there should be the liquidation proceedings. But there are certain, you see, the powers which were given at that point of time, that how the rehabilitation, how the process has to be taken, and the private liquidators concept was brought into that part. No, even the entire looking into the fate of this, which I am just coming to, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So under this SICA or under the BFR or AFR, all proceedings will get abated. And now, if you are falling under the new code, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Resolution Code, then within 180 days you have to file afresh, and all those proceedings will stand vacated to that part. So what I have done in my presentation was, I tried to even make a distinction what was in SICA and what is in the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which we can compare it. If the time permits, I'll just take it fast to this thing. So these are moving from this. Any prosecution instituted under the repealed enactment pending immediately prior to commencement of the new act before any court, that shall continue to be heard by the said court and be subject to the provisions of the new act. Any inspection, investigation, or inquiry order to be done under the old act shall continue to be proceeded, as if the inspection, investigation, or inquiry has been ordered under the provisions of the new act. Any matter filed with the registrar, regional director, central government, under the old act before the commencement of new act, and not fully addressed by the concerned authority shall be concluded in terms of this thing. Now, the CLB stand dissolved, and the NCLT and NCLT AT has been made operational for this thing. There is a concept of special courts that has already been brought in pursuant to 435, 436. So all offences under the new act that shall be tried by special court, and application of court to proceeding before special court is there. And this transitional provision is also there, the said section provide. And even in the special, when I was just reading the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, even the powers have been given, those matters which are under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, that will also be tried by the special court, which is coming in that code, which we will just take it for this thing. Special courts have already been made effective with the concurrence of the respective Chief Justices of the High Court. These are the existing courts that has been notified to be the special courts. And then I think the most important part I wish, which Mr. Chandok was also saying, that how we can make the time limits, because all the matters are supposed to be disposed within a period of 3 months, and the president of NCLT or the chairperson of NCLT can extend, but not more than 90 days. I still feel, sir, whether it will be a mandatory provision or it is a directive. And as we were just talking about that, again under 226, you are going to the High Court for extending the time limit for this. So these are the issues. Then the important part under the Contempt Act, you see, normally the powers under the contempt is with the High Court, but even the NCLT and NCLT has been extended for this, is to punish for the contempt, and civil court know to have jurisdiction, and there are right to legal representations. I'm just making brief because I'll leave the presentation here, but I'll just talk about more on the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which Thanks to NIRC again, I must say, that given me the chance to read it. But let me just go back to the historical perspective of the banking system in India and how we have to take it up. If I go by this, we had the Presidency Town Insolvency Act, when the Britishers, and it is on 1909, when they thought about it, that we should have some act to regulate the financial transactions, particularly in the President's towns. That was in Bombay, Calcutta and Madras. Now it's Mumbai and Chennai. So that was there. And then they brought another act. And maybe that till now I was not having any chance to read those statutes for this thing is the Provincial Insolvency Act 1920. Those two acts were still existing. That has been repealed by virtue of this Insolvency and Banking Bankruptcy Code 2016. So the Provincial Insolvency Act was applicable to all those cities which were other than the presidency towns. And then we had the CPC, Civil Procedure Code, and in those presidency and provincial insolvency, the corporates were not subject to this, only it was the individuals which were subject to those jurisdictions, and the corporates were not subject to the purview of this thing until that time. This was the Civil Procedure Code. They had to file a suit for recovery, and when there is a suit for recovery, you are getting a decree, you know the system. It used to take 15 years, 20 years, even to once you have fought, and then to get the decree executed, maybe under Order 21, which you have to take a lot of time for taking this thing under the CPC. And then they thought that there should be some act, and they brought in SICA, Sikh Industrial Companies Special Provision Act 1985, that let there be act for the revival and rehabilitation. Let there be act that how best you can revive the companies, how best you can take up the matters with regard to Sikh companies, and if it is not there, and people used to take the advantage. Even, you see, there was a section 22 of SICA which used to talk about, and they removed the concept that okay, all the proceedings and suits will stay, and for how much time and other thing, there was no time for this thing. I still remember when I was starting this profession and this thing, there was Amitabh Bachchan Corporation Limited, I think at one point of time, and only those companies which are the industrial companies and which are coming in the scheduled industry, they are subject to taking this advantage of SICA for this thing. And I still remember, because Amitabh Bachchan Corporation Limited, it was not an industrial company, and there were so many suits and this thing, and this was one of the matter which was taken it up. I still remember, and still if you go for a Google search, you will find it. And they set up a cassette manufacturing company in Noida for this thing, made it as an industrial company, and then they brought that company to make all those suits stayed as regard those matters were there. So these are the issues which were coming up for this. And then I think Mr. Chandok has already talked about that, okay, what is the fate which he has seen in SICA, and what about the fake in the DRT. When we talk about the DRT for this thing, they brought the act, and if you see the name, this was recovery of debt due to bank and financial institutions. That was the act which has been brought in, pursuant to which the DRT was established. And through this IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, if I put it in as a short form as a IBC, part of this DRT process is going to NCLT, which I will take it up for that, and part with regard to the individuals and the partnership firm is going to the DRT for this. So, and then there was a process. It is only where the suit has to be filed only by the banks and the financial institutions. Fate of other creditors were totally taken away for this thing. We had, then coming to this was SARFAESI, and it took lot of time even to remember the name. If I say that full form of SARFAESI, probably you will read 5-7 times, then you cram it, then you will read it, that it is no SARFAESI is the securitization and reconstruction of financial assets and enforcement of security interest. This is how the name of the statute suggests that what SARFAESI is. Then, because of the non-obstante provisions for this thing is, whether the SARFAESI will override the RDDB Act and the SICA, there is also a non-obstante provisions. And then they were ruling by the high courts on this thing that SARFAESI will override even the SICA for this. But now, the kind of provision which has come to the IBC, even where there are stay provisions, it will stay back even the SARFAESI provisions also to that extent for whatever the period that is provided, that's 180 days. Now, as regard the DRT is concerned, similarly, I think NCLT probably, while invoking the provisions of this code, this would be a summary procedure, and only cases where in the DRT which is taking it up, there is also a limit which has been prescribed in the IBC, which I'll shortly take it up, where those remedies were there. So, government, I must say, bringing this legislation of insolvency and bankruptcy code, I think it must be, I must say it's a forward-looking step. It's a modern legislation. It will definitely look into the early detection, because even if you look at it, the kind of amendments which have been made, even your winding up process under 434, 1956, more than 90% of the cases, sir, if you permit me to say, I think the winding up is where we were talking about the companies which are unable to pay debt. I think they have moved away from the concept of the companies which are having unable to pay debt. The question is coming whether you have committed default or not. And even once you are talking about the NPAs and other things, the concept of NPAs were then when there was 2 or 3, they have made what do you mean by default under the IBC. Even once you have made one default for this. Even if you are a bank or financial institution, and there are other banks, the default by the others can also give you the power to go to this and seek the rehabilitation process under the IBC, which you have to do it within 180 periods. So in totality, if I look at it before I will do the comparison, the entire insolvency and bankruptcy code, there are total 5 parts. Part 1 of the IBC is the definitions. One must look at it, what all those definitions are, particularly the definitions regarding what do you mean by board. Where under the, because unless and until I'll give you the brief, it would be not worth that I will take it up for this, that if we can compare this. So, as regard the NCLT, it's only the corporate persons, which are the companies and the LLPs, that will be taken it up by the NCLT. The individuals and the partnership firms are going to the DRT. So you need to look at it, what do you mean by corporate person? Who is the corporate debtor? What do you mean by default? What do you mean by the insolvency professionals? Who would be the insolvency professional agency? Who is the financial creditor? So they have brought the concept. Instead of saying that it is a secured creditor or an unsecured creditor, they brought the concept of a financial creditor and the operational creditor. And the procedure for the financial creditor and the operational creditor has been separately defined for this. And then the part 2 of that IBC is where there will be a resolution, corporate insolvency resolution process. Largely it is for the revival and rehabilitation. And if you are not coming to that process successfully, it will go to the liquidation process. So there are 6 chapters in part 2. There are definitions. Then they have defined that what do you mean by corporate insolvency resolution process. If you are failing with the corporate resolution insolvency process, then there are liquidation process. And then they have also brought the concept of fast track corporate insolvency resolution process. And then the provisions which were in the Companies Act regarding to the voluntary winding up, that has been taken away, it is omitted. The voluntary winding up also has been taken up. The provisions with regard to that, okay, which are the circumstances which goes for winding up, 2 more. Other than that provision, they have retained it. So the two provisions, that the company is unable to pay debt or insolvency pursuant to the revival which was under SICA. That liquidation process, those circumstances have been taken away from the Companies Act, and they have taken it in the code itself. So there are corresponding changes which I'll briefly touch upon even in the Companies Act which have been made. And then the adjudicating authority, as I'm telling you, is the process is given in chapter 6. And then offenses and penalties. I personally feel the kind of offenses and penalties which have been prescribed, whether how far it would be taken, the only thing is that there's a minimum imprisonment of 3 years or maximum 5 years, or there is a fine, or there is a fine which is minimum 1 lakh and maximum 1 crore. I don't know. And then if you have to prove it, the mens rea and other things to bring it, that okay, whether the imprisonment has to be given, whether those fine provisions or penalty provisions, personally I feel that it should have been more strengthened to that part, which one has to take it up for this. Part 3 of the IBC is, which is prescribed for individuals and partnership firms, which the matter will go to the DRT. I am not, for the sake of time, I am just skipping it for this. Part 4 talks about the regulating, how you have to regulate the insolvency professionals agencies. So the basic difference I'll just tell you is, your resolution professional must be an insolvency professional. Your insolvency professional must pass a test which has to be given by the insolvency professional agency. Insolvency professional agency and insolvency professionals, they must be registered with the board. So that is the process which I am just summing it up for this thing. Then they have brought in the part 5, which is the miscellaneous provisions talking about the insolvency and bankruptcy fund, and where they also provided that the government will go with the agreement with the foreign countries and the trial of offense for the special courts. So this is the summary of what is there. And if you look at it from that process, I'm just making it as briefly, I can take it up. NPS, how much time I have? Still half an hour. Can take it? Okay. So with this background, let me just take it up with this thing, that what is the distinction which I am drawing it for this. Because I thought that let me first give you the sum and substance of the IBC. how it has to be taken it up. Now here, as IBC, as I said, the provisions of this code, it applies to the company, limited liability partnership, and the bodies incorporated under any other law. So that you can define it as a corporate debtors. These are the corporate debtors. And then the partnership firms and individuals, which will go to the DRT. But if I look at it from the SICA point of view, the provisions were only applicable to the scheduled industry, other than the scheduled industry relating to ships and other vessels. And reference to BFR may be when industrial company has become a SIC company. Here, you as an insolvency professional, as a resolution, when you are making an application, you must be having at least a default of minimum of 1 lakh. Central government may specify higher value, which is not more than 1 crore. And the insolvency and bankruptcy proceedings may be initiated by the entitled persons in the event of default. This is very important, is that it is not that, okay, I'm unable to pay that, and you are arguing before the courts that I have the ability to pay that. There is a liquidity problem. We are resolving the liquidity problem and the winding up process. So, identification of the problems they are taking, it is the moment there is an event of default. And when is the default? Means any non-payment of debt. When whole or any part of or installment of the amount of debt has become due and payable is not paid. And if you look at SICA, the provisions were only when you are a potentially SIC company, and then there was a provision, there is a concept of a peak net worth, and the peak net worth is if you have completed minimum of 5 years and the 4th year peak net worth. In the preceding 4 years, what was the peak net worth to determine whether you are a potentially SIC company or not? And then the concept of a SIC company, if the your net worth is eroded, and then there is a deviation. That deviation came in the Companies Act 2013. Then we were wondering that, okay, what would be the fate of the unsecured creditors? No, even the secured creditors, unsecured creditors, that has been taken up for this thing. Is the important part which I am just making it is the process which I am just talking about is, so the persons entitled to the insolvency resolution process are the financial creditors and the operational creditors. And they have defined the financial creditors are those to whom the financial debt is owed. They have defined what do you mean by the financial debt, where that is there. And the operational creditors are the creditors, the 3 types of creditors have been given. One is your trade creditors against the supply of goods and services. The second part of this thing is the creditors which are the employees, where the dues to the employees. And the third is where the dues, the statutory dues to the government. They have clubbed the 3 category of creditors under the operational creditors, and then there are insolvency creditors. But in the financial creditors and other things, in the definition of corporate debtor, they have not included the persons who are providing the financial services, and they are registered with any of the regulators, be it the Reserve Bank of India, or be it with the SEBI, or with the IRDA. These are the persons who are providing the financial services. They have been taken away from this thing. If there is any insolvency resolution process in respect of those creditors, they will be governed by the respective statutes and under the Companies Act as regard that part is concerned, but not on the code. But if I look at SICA, those are the persons who are authorized to file the applications. Then is, once you have to file the application by the financial creditor, you also have to suggest that who would be the interim resolution professional. And the interim resolution professional is only person who is an insolvency professional, who has cleared the exams and who has been registered with the board. You name it, you can provide it, and his term will be only for a period of 30 days. And if you're not providing it, the insolvency commencement will date. The court will see whether to admit your application or to reject your application, in both the cases within 14 days. And if it is admitted, the insolvency commencement date will be reckoned from this. That will become a relevant date for this. Then is the operational creditors, almost the same thing. Within 10 days you have to provide the copies, you have to give the justification that which are the demand notices, supply agreements and other things. All you have to provide to prove that you are an operational creditor. And the corporate debtor will notify to OC the existence of any dispute. If it is not notified, then you can move that application, and then again the process of 14 days will continue. Then the corporate debtor applicant is the corporate debtor or who is filing the application. They can make it interim resolution professional in the proposed application, and from that date it is given. But if you look at it, the SICA part for this thing, where the provisions of section 15 and section 23 were applicable, the reference is to be made within 60 days from the date of finalization of the audited accounts. And then there were number of judgments at what stage the accounts are considered to be finalized. Is it when the shareholders have approved it, or is it when the board have approved it, and how that has to be considered it? There are judgments to that aspect also, but that is within 60 days you were supposed to file. 5 years minimum you have to identify, no such provision. They are saying that okay, we have to tackle it at what stage you can go ahead when you have committed a default. Post admission of reference application by BFR. Now this is the important part. NCLT to declare moratorium on the insolvency commencement date, and that moratorium period is either on the completion of this insolvency resolution process, or when the resolution plan is approved by the NCLT, or where liquidation order is passed. All that has to be done within a period of 180 days, and maximum time further to be extended is the 90 days. And if you have not proposed, then the file will move to the board, that is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board, who will recommend the persons who can be the insolvency professionals. And here in BFR, in any case, you were talking about that agency to be nominated, and the agency had to take it up for this. And this is the declaration of moratorium, prohibition on institution of suits. The NCLT can provide that okay, that all suits, institution or continuation of pending suits proceeding against corporate debtor, including execution of any judgment decree in any court of law, tribunal, arbitration panel or other authorities, and that is with non-obstante. To my mind, even your SURFACI provisions, they can even stay back the SURFACI till the time that is there, which the NCLT has been taken power to this thing is. So all this, I am just not repeating it because it is written in this thing, transferring, encumbering. So all that moratorium can give for a certain period by the NCLT, but supply of essential goods services to the corporate debtor, not to be terminated or suspected or interrupted during the moratorium period, that will continue, and that the force or prohibition shall not apply to such transactions as may be notified by the central government. Then is when the insolvency resolution professional has been nominated, he will do the collation of claims and will constitute a committee of creditors. And your committee of creditors, they must approve it by the 2/3 majority for this thing. The appointment of resolution professionals in a creditors meeting held within 7 days. So the one question which was coming, suppose there are, and all the members of that committee has to be the secured creditors. So the moment I was reading this provision, the question came to me, what about when there are no secured creditors and it is only the unsecured creditors? Then the insolvency resolution professional has to move that application to the board board will recommend that, okay, what should be the constitution of the committee of the creditors, who will, you see, undergo that process for this thing. So, once the resolution plan has been there, if the NCLT has approved the resolution plan, it is approved, and if it is not, it is rejected, then the liquidation process start. Then they have provided for the fast track proceedings, application for fast track, where the government will determine that, okay, these are the category of corporate debtors and the applicants who can avail. Those rules have yet to come. So if the asset criteria and the turnover criteria and the debt criteria, they will prescribe it, then you can take the fast track process that has to be completed within a period of 90 days instead of 180 days, but the resolution process will continue to be the same. And if no resolution process is approved, again the liquidation process will start. So this is when the corporate debtor will be put into liquidation, that has been prescribed, and this is the process of liquidation, is that you have to appoint a liquidator. Now, the appointment of insolvency, interim insolvency professional is for 30 days. NCLT may approve the interim resolution professional as a resolution professional. And that resolution professional can also be a liquidator. But if your interim resolution professional, you don't want to be a resolution professional, you have to move an application to the NCLT. NCLT will appoint the resolution professional. And similarly, if resolution professional is there, either NCLT feels or you appoint it, then they can appoint us again the liquidator from one of the registered insolvency professionals which are on the data bank of the board. So the appointment of liquidator will be there. He will set up the formation of liquidation estate. There will be a consolidation of claims. Then there is a process of verification of claims. Then the admission or rejection of claims. Then there will be a determination of value of claims. Then the appeal by the creditor to NCLT within 14 days if there is a rejection of claim. If the resolution professional has rejected your claim, the creditor can go to NCLT and appeal for this thing. And if that is there, then the liquidator to scrutinize the potential undervalued and extortionate credit transaction that have been defined, which there are three terms, whether if there is a possibility of undervalued transaction, it is the same almost if you see this thing, certain transaction to be considered void and the courts can take it, and if those are the processes, then there would be a distribution of assets and dissolution of CDs for this thing. So then there will be appointment of liquidator. NCLT to appoint liquidator after passing of the order of the liquidation. If the NCLT is passed, so your resolution professional can be a liquidator, or NCLT has a power to replace the resolution professional. And the liquidator will assume all duties and powers of the governing liquidator. And please take note that the moment the insolvency resolution, even in the interim resolution professional has been, you have filed it, the powers of the board will also vest with that, the interim insolvency professional. That's very, very important, that how to bring the management under the control, that okay, they behave in a proper way as far as the determination, because they can lose their management rights. So what will form part of the liquidation estate? The code provides that assets of the corporate debtors as are evidence in the balance sheet, all investments of the corporate debtors, all encumbered assets, tangible assets, whether movable or immovable, intangible assets, assets subject to determination of ownership by the court, assets in respect of which secured creditor has relinquished security interest, all proceeds of liquidations that will be taken it up as part of the estate, liquidation estate, which the liquidator has to manage. And these are the assets which will not be included, which are the assets owned by third party, That is the assets held in the trust, bailment contracts, sums due to any workmen, employees, other contractual for use of assets, other assets as may be notified by the central government, personal assets of any shareholders which are in the corporate debtor, that will not be included, assets of any Indian or foreign subsidiary. If you have an investment in the subsidiary, shares are part of the assets. But you cannot say that the subsidiary's assets are also forming part of the liquidation process. That will not be happening. Assets in security collateral held by the financial service providers. So if there are security, collateral security which you have given, that will also not be included, because there are judgments, even they say the trust properties will be outside the purview of the winding up provisions. Any other assets as may be specified by the board, that will be taken it up. Then the liquidator to collect claims within 30 days from the date of commencement of liquidation. The financial creditor shall provide a record of such claims with an information utility. There is a concept of information utility that will be set up by the government. All records, your default matters will go and report it to this thing. The moment it is reported and it is in the information utility, you can just bring a justification that his default is coming, he has committed a default, and this corporate debtor can be subject to the IBC code. The financial creditors or the operating creditors can bring in the applications. Creditor may withdraw claim within 14 days. Liquidator can ask for additional documents. Liquidator may admit. So this is the procedure which is given in the IBC as regard the procedure for claims is concerned, and still the rules have yet to be formed. Certain procedures will be formed part of that rules which you have to taken it up for this. But as regard the preferential transactions which we had in the Companies Act, if there are financial transactions which will be taken away for this thing, it will be void. Those concepts have been taken in the code also for this. That has been taken. The relevant time has been defined. Certain preferential transactions which shall not include the transfer made in the ordinary course or transfer creating with bona fide, that has also been added to that part. NCLT in cases of preferential transactions can order on those transactions that okay, how to set right the things. So they can, NCLT can make any or more of those things as part of the order, how to set right, how to bring back the assets or recoup the losses, everything they can just make it to that part is there. Then the undervalued transactions. So I'll just skipping it because of the paucity of time, because I'm getting the feelers that okay, I'm taking much more the time allotted. So this is the insolvency resolution process that has been taken before voluntary liquidation process has been taken away from the Companies Act. So I'll just, before I end my presentation, just bring it to you in summary form what all changes, corresponding changes in the Companies Act which are being making. Number one, the definition of company liquidator has been changed, and it is amended to provide that he shall be appointed by the tribunal amongst the insolvency professionals under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So that is the one change, major change in the company liquidator. The entire chapter 19, which was the revival and rehabilitation, starting from section 253 to 269, that has been omitted. Section 270, mode of winding up, there were two modes prescribed. One is the winding up by the tribunal, other was the winding up by the voluntary winding up. Voluntary winding up has been taken away. So all provisions governing winding up, that has been omitted, and corresponding changes have been made in the relevant provisions. Wherever the reference of voluntary winding up was coming in the section, that has been taken away. Then, as I mentioned it to you, section 271, which was corresponding to section 434 of the Companies Act 1956, which are what all are the circumstances concerning winding up. That one of the major was the company has an inability to pay debt. That has been taken away from the Companies Act, and the winding up under the chapter 19, that also has been taken. Other provisions in the sections has been taken. So all in all, if you look at it, the winding up by the creditors has been omitted. The corresponding changes have been made. Power of the tribunal on application for stay of winding up of rehabilitation process is omitted. Changes made with the overriding preferential payments. That's one of the very important part which I would like to make it. Even the normal overriding preferential payments, that has been, you see, there is a change. Even the payments to the government, that has been ranked even up after these unsecured creditors. If the secured creditor is there is an interest, then there is a workman due proportion that has been defined, and there is a definition that how the workman dues proportion will be determined. That by way of example has been given in the code, that has to be taken it up this thing. So all those changes have been taken it up in the appropriate sections of the Companies Act. With this, thank you so much for your patient hearing. So all in all, now you will have the winding up process in a different, I would say the 9 types of winding up are now there. One winding up under the code, one winding up under the Companies Act, then probably the one winding up for the small companies, one winding up for the unregistered companies, one winding up for the foreign companies, right? And then the dissolution process, if it is a defunct company, the dissolution process under the order, dissolution process under the code. So all in all, if I will feel that, okay, I could see that there would be a dissolution process, there would be a 9 type of dissolution process that you have to deal with. With this, thank you so much for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Satwinder ji. On behalf of NIRC, I thank Mr. Tiku and Mr. Satwinder ji for their valuable inputs. I'm sure their valuable inputs will be of immense benefit for the members. Now I'll request Mr. Kapil Sapori to present green certificate to Mr. Tiku. Thank you, Mr. Kapil. Now I'll request Mr. H.K. Bakshi to please give green certificate to Satwinder ji. So due to protocol and will be not providing green certificate, and please give a big round of applause for both the speakers. Now, I'll request our speakers and all the members to please join us for lunch. And for senior members, they are requested to, their separate arrangement has been made in the back hall. You are requested to assemble there.